Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Time for Action, Empowering the Faithful to Reclaim America, by Rafael Cruz, narrated by D.X. Black. Forward. Dads are arguably the most influential people on the planet. The power they wield over their children is immeasurable. Something as simple as an approving glance can fill a child with confidence, security, and love. On the other hand, as all dads have surely experienced, a moment of indifference or outburst of anger can crush a tiny, fragile soul. You've probably heard the phrase, "Behind every good man is an even better woman," and that's true. But an even greater truth is that behind every great man is an even greater father. When Ted Cruz first landed on my radar screen, I didn't know what to make of him. I liked what he was saying about the Constitution, liberty, and God. I admired his ability to effortlessly articulate conservative principles and values, a quality shockingly absent among most, if not all, GOP candidates in the past several decades. One of the great failures of the Republican Party has been the failure to vigorously defend these principles and values. It's a spectacular failure, because not only are they the bedrock of this nation, but they have the added bonus of a proven track record. They work. Conservatives have the incredible advantage and luxury of the winning argument being on their side, yet few, if any, candidates have demonstrated the ability and the confidence to speak this truth boldly. Ted Cruz has this ability. But here's the rub. I've seen this song and dance before. Candidate comes along and tickles ears with soaring rhetoric and quotes from Ronald Reagan. We make signs, donate time, and perhaps even money, defend them in public and on the air. We propel them into office and wait for them to start working on everything they promised out on the campaign trail. Then we notice something is wrong. I don't know whether it's a calculated choice or not, but something happens when they arrive within the city limits of Washington, D.C. The constitutional conservative we all fell in love with disappears, swallowed up by the progressive establishment GOP. Next thing we know, they're supporting all kinds of giant government legislation, and we're back to square one. So I was cautiously optimistic, but certainly not convinced, about the authenticity of Ted Cruz. Then I met Ted's father, Rafael Cruz, and any shred of doubt quickly vanished. I was fascinated as he told me his incredible story of growing up in Cuba and becoming a revolutionary fighter in the 1950s with Fidel Castro's army. While most 17-year-olds were finishing up high school, Rafael Cruz was leading a group of insurgents in a plot against Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Cruz was caught, thrown in jail, and brutally tortured. This horrific experience only emboldened him to continue the fight. But eventually, he decided it was better to get out. He fled to America and ended up at the University of Texas. He had barely any money to his name and could hardly speak English, but he was determined. While he was at UT, he learned that Castro, with whom he'd been fighting, was a communist. He realized it was wrong to have fought for him, and actively did what he could to now fight against him. This time his weapons were letters and the power of persuasion, as he tried to convince his former band of brothers that this was not the cause they should be fighting for. Rafael Cruz understood the horrors of socialism and communism better than most. He suffered both physically and mentally, and barely survived his youth. Most of the candidates you will see on stage in this election cycle do truly appreciate and value freedom, but they'll never be able to relate in the same way Ted Cruz can. You see, dads wield incredible amounts of power, and when Rafael Cruz told his teenage son about the torture, the fighting, the oppression, the murder, and the communist hellhole he grew up in, there's no doubt that imagery shook his young son to the core and burned an unforgettable image and feeling that would never, ever go away. Many candidates throw around constitutional cliches in hopes of moving the approval rating a few points. The fight for freedom is very real for the Cruz family. The Constitution holds extremely emotional and personal value for them because they know firsthand what it's like not to have it. Most Americans take freedom for granted and assume it will always be there, no matter whom we elect into office. In the history of humankind, freedom is the rarest of societal experiments. More than 95% of all human civilization has lived under what could be considered oppressive regimes. Truly free countries, such as America, have existed only 5% of the time since humans have walked the earth. What an incredible gift and privilege we have been given to live in such a time and in such a place. Trapped in our comforts, we cannot comprehend this. I would go so far as to wager that some candidates cower to political correctness because they don't really believe deep down to their core that freedom is under attack. They don't really believe that your rights under the Constitution will ever be stripped away. They just see it as a way to gain supporters and eventually power. Ted Cruz will do anything to protect and preserve freedom. He has shown this time and time again in the belly of the beast in Washington, D.C. He has fearlessly stood up to not just Democrats, but to the kingmakers in the GOP as well. Think of the attacks this man has withstood. The brunt of his own party has been thrust down on him many times. He single-handedly has been blamed for shutting down the government. It's one of the most ludicrous arguments ever made, but Ted had to grin and bear it, because he stood for what he believed, while few had the courage to stand alongside him. Some have accused him of creating political stunts and grandstanding, but this is simply not accurate. Those are the actions of a weak, greedy, selfish person. Ted's motivation stems from a very real, authentic, and personal place. He is doing this because he believes it. And he believes it because his father taught him and told him everything he experienced. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better American story than this one. Former Cuban revolutionary flees to America with no money and can't speak the language, and now his son is a sitting United States senator who is running for president. How awesome is that? Behind every great man is an even greater father. And let it be stated for the record unequivocally, Rafael Cruz is one of the greatest freedom fighters of his generation. Glenn Beck. Introduction. I do solemnly swear. Sitting in the Senate chambers, my eyes filled with tears and meandered down my cheeks. Watching my son take the oath of office nearly caused my heart to burst. Was I dreaming? That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution. Not many families spend their evening dinners discussing the finer points of this foundational document, but ours did. And my son Ted's love for it drove him into the legal profession and ultimately to a life of public service. Few people understand and defend the Constitution like Ted Cruz. Regrettably, too many politicians bend it, twist it, and try to change it. If they succeed, our nation will crumble. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic, the United States of America is in danger. ISIS, Boko Haram, and other Muslim extremists threaten our security and way of life. Vladimir Putin is leading Russia back into the Cold War. But our greatest enemy doesn't reside outside our borders. Perhaps our greatest enemy is apathy among the American people. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. I blinked my eyes and refocused. The Vice President of the United States was administering the oath to my son. That I take this obligation freely. Only in America could the son of a Cuban immigrant who came to this great country with nothing and unable to speak the language be elected to the U.S. Senate and potentially become the President of the United States. Only in America. Fewer than 6 decades before, I had fought against oppression in my homeland to win the freedoms that Americans enjoy. Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. But our freedoms are eroding. Americans are trading liberty for the oppression and control I once knew in Cuba. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office. We desperately need true patriots who love America. Uncommon men and women committed to rescuing this nation from economic, moral, and spiritual collapse. Men and women with the resolve to abide by the Constitution without hesitation, on which I am about to enter. Our country yearns for leaders who will awaken the sleeping giant and call us to the greatness of our founding fathers. So help me God. But we cannot do this without God's help. Without it, our nation and our way of life will no longer exist. Former President John Adams once said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." We need elected officials who rely on God for wisdom and strength, and who will protect America from the attacks of those who seek to undermine it. This is America's time for action. In the summer of 1957, I arrived in America. After being imprisoned and tortured in my native Cuba for my involvement in the revolution against the Fulgencio Batista government, I knew that if I didn't escape, I would be killed. With very little money and unable to speak English, I paid my way through school at the University of Texas by working first as a dishwasher and later as a cook. In 1959, after Castro came to power, I returned to Cuba, believing that he would rid the country of corruption and align with America to make it a bulwark of freedom and democracy. But the communist Marxist policies he had instituted shocked me. Disillusioned, I left Cuba 3 weeks later, never to return again. And when I landed on American soil, I knew I had found my permanent home, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Within 7 years of leaving college, my wife and I had founded and owned a small business in oil and gas exploration. Then, in the late 1970s, I was shocked once again when the Jimmy Carter administration began implementing policies reminiscent of the bearded dictator I had left behind in Cuba. In addition to befriending communist strongmen like Fidel Castro, Yugoslavia's Joseph Tito, and Romania's Nicolae Ceausescu, Carter advocated the redistribution of wealth by taxing the rich and giving to the poor, which promoted greater dependency upon the government. He also returned the Panama Canal to Panama and their communist-leaning dictator, Omar Torrijos. After Castro came to power, hundreds of thousands of Cubans immigrated legally to the United States, not to mention the countless others who have risked their lives floating on dilapidated boats across the Gulf of Mexico. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, as of 2013, 1,144,000 Cuban immigrants were living on American soil. And how many Americans have immigrated to Cuba since 1959? A handful. And most of them were criminals trying to evade the U.S. government. People who have tasted communism firsthand can readily identify it, more than people who have spent their lives enjoying the fruits of freedom and democracy. After seeing how it ravaged my homeland, I decided to do everything within my power to prevent history from repeating itself in America. In late 1979, I joined the State Board of the Religious Roundtable, a coalition of Christians and Jews charged with mobilizing millions of people of faith to elect Ronald Reagan, whom I consider the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln. My son, Ted, had just turned 9. Throughout 1980, our dinner conversations centered on why we needed to get rid of a liberal, progressive president like Jimmy Carter and replace him with a constitutional conservative like Ronald Reagan. So Ted got a dose of conservative politics from a Christian worldview every day for a year before he was even a teenager. I must have told my son a dozen times, "You know, Ted, when I faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go?" Those words profoundly impacted Ted's life. Psalm 37:23 tells us that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Indeed, through Craig and Paige Moore, our clients and friends, Ted met Roland Story, the founder of the Free Enterprise Institute. They introduced him to the writings of Adam Smith, John Locke, Milton Friedman, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, and Frederick Bastiat, as well as to the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, and other important works. The Institute formed a group of 5 high school students, including Ted, and called them the Constitutional Corroborators. With the help of a memory expert, those 5 teenagers memorized the U.S. Constitution, and for the next 4 years they toured Texas, giving approximately 80 speeches on free market economics and the Constitution. Before Ted graduated from high school, he was passionate about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, free enterprise, limited government, and the rule of law. This passion became like fire in his bones. Jeremiah 20:9, New Living Translation. I know my son Ted will not compromise his principles in Washington, because that fire is as alive today as it was 30 years ago. Those early years shaped my son's life as well as mine. We grew keenly aware of how fragile freedom is, even in this great country of ours. As Ted immersed himself in America's founding documents and the lives of their framers, so did his mother and I. My wife, Eleanor, invested a great deal of time working with Ted and driving him to various events. I coached him on his speech organization and delivery, and soon he excelled in his presentations. Watching him speak was nothing short of exhilarating. This only confirmed what I had long sensed about Ted. Even when he was a young boy, I knew Ted had a special calling on his life. Every day, I immersed him in prayer, asking God to protect him and grant him wisdom. And I told Ted over and over, God has given you remarkable talents, and you must use those gifts to His glory. Ted knew in his heart that he would dedicate his life to fighting for the preservation of our precious liberty and serving we the people. While we share similar passions, my role differs from Ted's. He is a political leader. I am a minister. A message for the American people burns deep inside me, and I cannot keep it silent. Stop complaining about our political woes and do something about them. The only way we can dig out of our political hole is by involving ourselves in civic society and restoring the Judeo-Christian principles that have undergirded America, the driving force behind American exceptionalism. The Obama administration has intensified our progression into an age of lawlessness. This includes attacking our civil and religious liberties, deteriorating our quality of life, and destroying businesses through excessive taxation and regulation, jeopardizing the future of our children and grandchildren by accumulating ever-increasing national debt, fostering massive unemployment and underemployment, creating a dependent society in bondage to the government, trampling the Constitution, the rule of law, separation of powers, and limited government, leading our nation away from Judeo-Christian values and into secular humanism. I feel compelled to shout it from the housetops, as Jesus exhorted us to do, Matthew 10:27, New Living Translation, which is why I constantly crisscross the country, speaking at churches, pastors' conferences, Tea Party meetings, 9/12 meetings, a volunteer-based movement focusing on building and uniting our communities, homeschool gatherings, and political rallies. I'll speak where anyone will listen, to conservatives, libertarians, independents, anyone. In person or through radio and television interviews, I will do all I can to tirelessly share the message of restoration for America. This audiobook not only explains how we got to the condition in which we find ourselves today, but more important, how to restore this great nation to the shining city on a hill that Ronald Reagan so eloquently described. You'll hear about my life in Cuba and the harrowing story of my escape to America. Then I'll show you how America is tragically following the same path that Cuba did a half-century ago. We'll explore the seemingly innocuous philosophies that undermine our country. Next, I will chart a path to true freedom. Finally, my son Ted will offer some words on his optimistic vision for the future. There are more of us than there are of them. The problem is that far too many of us are asleep at the wheel. Well, the time has come for the American people to wake up and get active. It is time for us to put our hearts and souls into restoring this great nation of ours to that shining city on a hill. It is a time for action. But we can accomplish this only as we all work together, with no one lagging behind. The future of America is at stake, the future of our children and our children's children. It is for them that we must fight with all our might. Remember President Ronald Reagan's words, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States, where men were free. I hope that you will stand with me. I am not willing to have that conversation with my children and grandchildren. I will fight now, while we still have time. America is worth saving. May we be willing to covenant with one another before God, as did the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. 1. Freedom, a universal quest. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. Galatians 5:1. The American dream is not that every man must be level with every other man. The American dream is that every man must be free to become whatever God intends he should become. Ronald Reagan. A dot of perspiration trickled down my temple and past my cheek, deliberately finding its way to my chin. I could feel it hanging there, but I no longer cared. Tears threatened, and my nose began to run, a telltale sign that I was no longer in control. All my life I had lived according to my rules. The desire for freedom oozed from every pore in my body. As a teenager, I resisted the totalitarian Batista regime in Cuba. Then, the about-face of Fidel Castro, who shared a similar hunger for control as his predecessor, made it obvious that I needed to live in the land of the free. Once in America, I took the bull by the horns and graduated from the University of Texas on time, despite not knowing even a smattering of English when I enrolled my freshman year. Within a few short years, I was running my own geophysical company in the oil industry, but I still didn't feel free. Which brought me to Darrell and Betty Lasson's living room in 1975. The guilt of abandoning my wife and 4-year-old son 2,000 miles away weighed on me, as if I were swimming in the ocean with a cinder block tied around my neck. The weight finally brought me to my knees, literally. Dear God, I prayed, I can't go on like this. I need you to come into my life. I need you to heal my family and heal my heart. Please forgive me of my sins, which I know are many. Jesus, I give my life to you right now. I promise to live for you. In Jesus' name, Amen. As I concluded my prayer, I felt as if somebody snipped the cord that had enslaved me to that massive weight. I was free. Finally, totally free. Every man and woman since the beginning of time has yearned for freedom. From our terrible twos through the teenage years, we struggled with our parents over this very issue. Addiction clinics and support groups encourage us to fight the personal demons that control us. People and countries are willing to lay down their lives to live free from their oppressors. All of us find ourselves on a universal quest for freedom. 2,000 years ago, the Apostle Paul wrote in Galatians 5:1, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage." Following in his footsteps, our American forefathers wrote in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Freedom, liberty, the right to live and act in accordance with our consciences and before our God without fear of oppression and undue control. We cannot obtain it, nor is it learned. While still in the womb, our Creator endowed us, every person, with the longing to live free. This audiobook is about the freedom to live and to act. I share parts of my story because I believe you share similar desires. So, how did it all begin?
Rafael, I think we caught something.
My best friend Mayito and I were shark fishing on a small rowboat a mile off the shore, you heard that right, in the dark blue waters of Matanzas Bay on the north side of Cuba. Matanzas is called the City of Bridges for the many bridges that cross the 3 rivers in the city. Tourists often refer to it as the Venice of Cuba. At that moment, we wished we were standing on one of those bridges. Anything solid. After attaching a 2-pound chunk of tuna on a number 25 hook, we threw the 400-yard line into an area in the bay known for its sharks. Not long after that, the boat jerked. 30 yards away, a 6-foot shark surfaced for a moment at the end of our line, and then disappeared.
Mayito, if we can pull that shark in, we'll be the heroes of Matanzas.
Together, we engaged in a mighty tug-of-war with the powerful animal. Our boat began picking up speed as the shark pulled us out to sea. Then, suddenly, the line went slack.
Mayito, did you see how big that shark was?
Wham! Water began flooding into the boat. In a moment, we thought the shark had taken a big bite out of it, but later realized it had rammed the side, breaking off a big sliver of wood between the side and bottom. Terrified, we cut the line and headed back to shore as fast as we could. While Mayito rowed, I bailed water with a bucket. Our fear of being eaten by the shark or drowned in the bay fueled us with enough adrenaline to work as fast and hard as we could. And we needed it, because we were a mile out at sea, and the water was rushing in faster than I could bail. Finally, 300 yards from shore, the rowboat submerged. Mayito and I jumped out and paddled as hard as we could, pushing the boat to shore. Just another day growing up in Cuba, 17 years young and carefree. In 1901, Agustin Cruz and his wife Maria, with their 1-year-old son Rafael, boarded a ship in the Canary Islands, Spain, bound for the New World. Their hearts brimmed with anticipation and a sense of adventure for their lives in the Spanish-controlled Caribbean island of Cuba. Romantic stories and ideals brought them and others to the west from faraway lands. Conquistadors like Hernando de Soto led an expedition of 700 followers in 1593 from Havana into the southeastern United States in search of gold. 2 decades earlier, another conquistador, Hernán Cortés, may have been the first European to taste chocolate in a frothy drink, following a meal with the famous Aztec emperor Montezuma. The native peoples called it the elixir of the gods. Only royalty could drink it, and warriors just before a battle. Now, chocolate bistros were scattered throughout Europe. Hernández de Boncolo introduced tobacco to Europe. Not surprisingly, Columbus's first scouts reported their discovery of the leafy plant in Cuba. Within short order, Europeans across the continent were using tobacco in its various forms. Many Spaniards like Augustine and Maria were told that the land in Cuba was so fertile that anything would grow in its tropical climate. It sounded exciting. The West represented freedom and opportunity. So they boarded their crowded ship and sailed into the unknown. In spite of their lingering seasickness, their spirits remained high, because they had a dream. Upon arrival, Augustine worked from sunrise to sunset, energized by the goal of owning a farm. His relentless hard work and determination finally paid off, and after a few years he purchased a few acres of land and started a successful business. His dream had become a reality. Work at the farm was a family affair, and the kids went to school only long enough to learn the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Then they helped with many chores throughout the day. But fate took an ugly turn, and in 1917, Augustine became one of the millions of fatalities of the worldwide influenza epidemic. Augustine left behind his wife, Maria, and 6 children, the oldest of whom was my father, Rafael, who was only 17 at the time. Overwhelmed.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?